Political researcher Sanusha Naidu joins us now via Skype. Sanusha, so you heard there what the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal says. They will abide by this issue, but I have a feeling that not everyone will do so easily.
Good afternoon, Shahan, and to the viewers. I completely share your sentiment there. I think just listening to the spokesperson of the ANC and trying to understand what this process means, the 30-day period, because it's not about, according to the statement read out by the president last night, it's not about reviewing the decision that you need to step aside. It's about the process around which you step aside. Now, it seems to me that it's more complex than we anticipate. It's not a kind of done deal that you will step aside, but it's also not a kind of deal that says that the process is very easy. It's talking about labor relations, it's talking about frameworks, it's talking about consultation, and just reading the 14-page statement that came out, which reflects what the president said last night, it's also very confusing for me to understand what the SG's office is going to do, because that in itself is the real crux of this issue. It's about the SG's office and the SG himself. And so the SG's office has to consult with provincial structures and, come to all kinds of amicable consultation processes and outcomes, but at the same time he's taken the decision, which they welcomed, by the way, in the statement, to say that he's going to take counsel from past leaders. Now, again, who in the SG's office is going to lead this against the SG? So I'm a bit confused in that way, and I think these are the issues of complexity that needs to be clarified for us. But like you say, I think you're going to end up in a situation where some are going to be kind of compelled to take the 30-day issue and step aside. Others are going to basically stick to their guns because they don't see it as stepping aside.
Yeah, because that's, of course, the question, right? How do you trust the SG's office when the SG himself is facing these corruption charges? What's the process then, Sanusha, for the ANC to get a new person into that position? Does Jesse Duarte act, or do they look at someone else?
I'm not completely au fait with their internal processes, but my understanding, or just thinking about it, is that she will probably have to play some kind of interim role if he does decide to step aside. And of course, after 30 days, we could end up still talking about the fact that certain people have not stepped aside, or the fact that this 30-day window period was just kind of very, very complicated in the process itself. So I think there's that option of her stepping into that role, and maybe it'll be a limited role for him. But I think these are the nuances that need to be clarified just by the party itself. What do they mean? Because I think originally on Sunday evening, before the president could not be allowed to read out the statement, the impression was that it was a 7-day period. Now, that's quite a shortened period. So from 7 days to 30 days, I think you're dealing with, if you do the maths, you're dealing with more time for people to try and look at the process around how they step aside, and that will become another kind of protracted issue of tension.
Yeah, so there's not really any finality on this, is there? Because this 30-day period means that this process is dragging out even further, because we've been talking about this for a very long time.
Absolutely, Shahan, and it's really curious. I mean, I think you and I both have understood that it's a bit mind-boggling that a party that set its own resolutions is now debating its own resolutions in such protracted ways, and they haven't come to any kind of decisive action or decisive implementation. I think this has been a critical issue. I mean, some of the newspaper reports or some of the online reports have actually raised a very cynical, if not polemical question: is, do you think the SG will step aside? I mean, it's a kind of interesting question to raise. But I think if you haven't had finality around it, then I'm not sure where are we going. Are we just going to continue in a loop, or continue in this cul-de-sac and keep going round and round?
And who does Ace Magashule need to actually consult with? I'm guessing he's going to speak to people like Jacob Zuma. And that's a bad example to set, isn't it? So who does he actually consult with in the next 30 days to make a decision when the guidelines are quite clear within the party?
Well, it's clearly not Thabo Mbeki, because Thabo Mbeki kind of said that's a weakened office. So obviously, I think they're going to choose who this council is going to come from and who the leaders are within that council. It's definitely not going to be people that have been very kind of critical of the SG, critical of the stance he has taken, and critical of his positioning within the party and his role in the office. So obviously, I think that I'm not sure who it is. I don't know who these leaders are, these past leaders that they're going to consult with. There could be individuals coming out from these parallel factions around the MK vets. It could be individuals that exist within different structures within the ANC that haven't been really vetted in the way that they can be legitimate institutions of the ANC. But I think what's also important here is the fact that in that statement last night, the president also talked about banning of RET activities. Now that in itself creates another avenue in which the pushback becomes even more critical. So again, we don't know. It could be the head of the MK Veterans Association as well. It could have been a number of pro RET faction personalities and individuals who will be considered as leaders in their own right within the party, but not necessarily presidents that have served as a party head.
Yeah. So, you read the newspaper articles and analysis on what we heard last night. The Mail and Guardian says a lifeline for Magashule, obviously because of the 30 days, but Ramaphosa wins this round. So what do you assess, given the statement we heard last night, and what situation or predicament does it put Cyril Ramaphosa going into that elective conference next year?
Yeah, well, firstly, I think he did win a round, a particular battle. It doesn't mean that he's out of the woods of that battle. He's still in the kind of vicinity of trying to defend now what has been the statement, which, by all accounts, I think we kind of thought, okay, it's going to be much more decisive. Well, I suspected it would have been much more hard-hitting than what we saw. But again, in the context of what we are sitting and looking at, I think it was, in a way, kind of hard-hitting. But I think going forward, it's going to actually be very important to understand what does Ace Magashule do now in terms of what the 30 days mean. Where does he regroup? How does he regroup? And what is it he's going to be using as the kind of counsel to go forward and say, I'm not reviewing the decision, but I do think that under labor laws, this is not the right thing to do. Under these kinds of conditions, these processes, I think you've got to allow me to have my ability to investigate and go forward. So I think there's going to be all kinds of challenging the process and not necessarily the decision. And that's going to be where it's going to be a pushback. And then going forward to the NGC, as well as to the Cyril Ramaphosa review of his presidency and, of course, the elective conference, I think there may be those elements within the party that will say, right, maybe we need to review the president and how he has conducted the affairs of the party. And so we know in the past this has been a go-to strategy to do recalls and whatever, but we're not sure whether this becomes part of the process, because the NEC, again, is supposed to be the authority within the spaces of two elective conferences from the past to the next one. But again, this NEC is caught within these different battles, and whether or not they take it outside of the party, I don't know whether they'll be able to continue to mobilize in the context of an ANC that's actually in conflict with itself because of the RET ban. So I think it's going to be many battles that the Cyril Ramaphosa faction will have to probably start winning from now onwards, until they get to the NGC. And then, of course, what does this mean if there's an early exit of people from the party? Can they call for an early elective conference? These are all the grey areas that we have to start thinking about.
Yeah, battles and the ANC, deja vu, isn't it? Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Sanusha Naidu is a political analyst.